Ontario tables new legislation that they say will fix long-term care. Details coming up. The province also announced that all Ontario schools will have access to take-home PCR COVID-19 tests when they'll be available coming up. And it was a wild scene in Scarborough overnight after a man was shot and killed. The latest from the lead detective. That's ahead. 339 degrees from 299 Queen Street West. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24. Hello, I'm Mark Liverman. The province has tabled long-term care legislation at Queen's Park. The bill pledges to fix long-term care by ensuring a commitment to provide an average of 4 hours of daily direct care per resident per day by March 31st, 2025. It's strengthening the residents' Bill of Rights and establishes new compliance rules, including the doubling of fines for homes convicted of an offense.
I rise today to introduce the Providing More Care, Protecting Seniors and Building More Beds Act 2021, which, if passed, would repeal the current Long-Term Care Act 2007, creating the Fixing Long-Term Care Act of 2021 and amend the Retirement Home Act of 2010. If passed, the proposed legislation would establish in law the ambitious commitments of our government has made to fix long-term care. The proposed legislation will support all three pillars of our plan to fix long-term care: improving staffing and care, protecting residents through better accountability, enforcement and transparency, and building modern, safe and comfortable homes. Mr. Speaker, supporting seniors in retirement homes is equally important to our government. If passed, the amendments to the Retirement Home Act of 2010 would improve the safety and well-being of residents in retirement homes and introduce new data collection measures to protect consumers and residents and safeguard the collection of residents' data. Mr. Speaker, as you know, so many Ontarians are connected and care about long-term care in retirement homes, whether the residents and staff are getting the care that they need.
And Rod Phillips announced earlier this week plans to beef up enforcement by doubling the number of inspectors. NDP Deputy Leader Sarah Singh says Ford's government is rewarding for-profit organizations.
What we need to do is actually transition those homes to the public sector. Right now, they're operated by large corporations where shareholders are benefiting. The quality of care is compromised in those for-profit homes. What the NDP has proposed is to bolster the not-for-profit sector, to invest in home and community-based care so that people can actually stay at home and age at home in their communities. We need to be investing in home care, but if we continue to reward bad actors with lucrative contracts, we aren't going to be able to transition our system into one that actually provides a quality of care for residents as well as for people in our communities.
All schools across Ontario will soon have access to take-home PCR tests for students and staff. Starting in mid-November, more schools will be provided the less invasive tests that the Ford government says will make testing more accessible. The province is also introducing a test-to-stay approach using rapid antigen testing. Unvaccinated, asymptomatic students would take a rapid test every day in order to keep attending school. This will only be used in cases not involving a close contact exposure. Further, unvaccinated staff will now have to take a rapid test 3 times a week. The education minister says there are still about 15% of staff who have not attested to their vaccination status.
In this expanded program, students will be able to pick up a PCR self-collection kit at school. They can complete it at home and provide the sample at convenient locations within their community. And by enabling students to pick up a PCR self-collection kit at school, the program will help address barriers for students who have challenges with quickly obtaining a test at a testing center when they're symptomatic or have been identified as a close contact of a confirmed COVID-19 case. The take-home approach will also provide convenience for parents and for families and help to potentially identify more cases to keep these schools open and safe.
Tell you at Sick Kids, we have administered over 80,000 of these test kits to more than 640 schools across the GTA since the return to school. And from our own experience, we have seen how accessible, low-barrier testing is crucial to keeping students in school while keeping SARS-CoV-2 infections out of school.
NDP education critic Merritt Stiles reacted to the news of take-home PCR tests for all public schools.
What I was hoping today was that we were going to hear from this government a move to bring in mandatory vaccination for education workers, and I saw instead, a very much delayed testing announcement, and then more tests for teachers that won't, or other education workers. And again, I think that's just going to tie school boards up in knots.
And schools across Toronto already have access to the take-home PCR tests. Ontario is further lifting capacity limits. Outdoor public events like parades and memorial services are no longer capped for attendance. Capacity limits are also lifted on other outdoor events like fairs and festivals, as well as at ski hills. Masks must be worn if physical distancing of 2 meters cannot be maintained. And indoors, concert venues, whether they are seated or not, can now have full capacity. That gives a big boost to the entertainment sector, which had been one of the final sectors to be able to open since March of 2020. Restrictions on indoor and outdoor private social gatherings remain at 25 and 100, respectively. Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie says Trillium Health Partners has the highest number of COVID-19 patients than any other hospital in the province.
Right now, Trillium Health Partners has 22 COVID hospitalizations and 5 patients in the ICU. And that's compared to Brampton's William Osler Hospital with a total of 8 COVID hospitalizations and 1 person in the ICU. Trillium has the most COVID inpatients compared to any other hospital in Ontario. We need to do everything we can to protect our hospitals, and that means going to get vaccinated.
And Mayor Crombie says just over 83% of eligible Peel residents are fully vaccinated. Canada's snowbirds are calling on the federal government to take action on travel rules. A group representing Canadian travelers who venture south in the winter are calling on the federal government to lift remaining COVID-19 restrictions. They're concerned fully vaccinated are unable to travel due to confusing rules and costly pre-travel requirements.
There are still many barriers in place that continue to make travel very difficult to achieve for the average Canadian senior. This includes the extremely high expense of a pre-departure PCR test, which can cost over $200 Canadian per person. This government policy was intended to be temporary and is counter to the recommendations by the federal government's COVID-19 testing and screening expert advisory panel report, which was reported in May of this year.
Now that the United States has expanded eligibility for COVID-19 booster shots to include those 65 years of age and over, we anticipate returning snowbirds will be the safest and most vaccinated Canadians when they return in the spring. We're calling on the federal government to follow the lead of other G20 countries and remove the testing requirement for vaccinated travelers.
Prior to the pandemic, roughly 600,000 people from Canada traveled to the U.S. for the winter each year. MPPs have voted unanimously to condemn actions taken by independent member Randy Hillier.
Landra has moved that this House expresses its disapproval of dispense. Is it the pleasure of the House that the motion carry? Carried.
The motion calls on the member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston to publicly apologize and to, quote, desist from further conduct that is inappropriate regarding his recent disinformation campaign about the COVID-19 vaccine. Hillier has taken to social media to ask the OPP to investigate certain deaths, but there is no indication they were related to the vaccines. Police have identified the man fatally shot in Scarborough overnight. 27-year-old Jamal James was found with gunshot wounds in a vehicle around 3:45 this morning. A car had crashed into the wall of a townhouse at Washburn Way and Tapscott Road in the area of Nielsen Road north of the 401. He was taken to hospital where he later died.
We are, again, doing a canvass of the immediate area. And anyone who does have any video that they could provide police, we would encourage them to provide it to us. Obviously, video is a major component in our investigations. So again, video that we're collecting in the interim, and anyone that has any that they think is relevant to our case to contact the Toronto Police Service.
We talk every day, 2, 3, 4 times a day. He said, "Uncle, anything happened to you? I got you." A couple of years ago, I lost my brother in Montreal. And I used to go there every week, every month to clean my big brother. He said, "Uncle, I got your back. I got your back. Anything happened to you, I gonna make sure you'll be the one who will clean you." He didn't deserve this.
Homicide police say they're just at the beginning of their investigation and may release more details later. Police have laid charges against the driver of a vehicle that struck and killed a 10-year-old girl in Vaughan last month. 33-year-old Than Lone Nguyen of Mississauga is facing a careless driving causing death charge. On September 1st, just before 11 a.m., the girl was struck while riding her bicycle on Pleasant Ridge Avenue. The driver did remain on scene. Police have charged a man with exposing himself in various locations around the Yonge and Eglinton area earlier this year. They say between August 1st and September 23rd, 55-year-old William Shorten exposed himself and performed indecent acts. Police believe there may be more victims and encourage anyone with information to come forward. The former head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks is meeting with the NHL's commissioner to discuss what he knew about sexual assault allegations. Current Florida Panthers bench boss Joel Quenneville is meeting with Gary Bettman in New York. Former first-round draft pick Kyle Beach, who was only known as John Doe up until yesterday, says he was sexually assaulted by a member of Quenneville's coaching staff in May of 2010. TSN's Rick Westhead spoke to CB24 today and says since Beach came forward, other survivors are reaching out to share their stories.
On Twitter, for instance, I've received many hundreds of messages from other abuse survivors, people who have survived abuse in the sports context, whether it's in professional sports or amateur sports, people who have suffered abuse within their own family, in churches, in the military, in their employment situations. And I'm just trying to take the time to go through and read all of these closely and get back to everyone. I've got no training for this. I'm just a reporter. But, you know, it does. Maybe the larger story here is just how widespread this is in our society.
The executive director of the Players Association, Don Fair, issued a statement that reads, in part, Kyle Beach has been through a horrific experience and has shown true courage in telling his story. There's no doubt that the system failed to support him in his time of need, and we are part of that system. NHL Hall of Famer Mark Messier weighed in on the situation this morning.
When you hear stories like this, it just like someone punches you in the gut. And no player should ever have to go through that. It's unacceptable what happened. I think the NHL came down and acted, in their fines and what's going on there. So they did that. And I think for the most part, it's just, to me, disgusting that he was able to leave that organization and go somewhere else and do the same thing. So, our hearts all go out to Kyle and his family and his girlfriend and his support system around him. We wish him all the best.
Canadian Olympic gold medalist and Toronto Maple Leafs executive Hayley Wickenheiser tweets, Kyle Beach, you are a brave man. You have and will change hockey culture forever. Much respect. Winnipeg Jets general manager Kevin Cheveldayoff is set to meet with NHL commissioner next week regarding this scandal. He served as Chicago's assistant general manager when team leadership was initially told about the allegations. 3:44 and 9 degrees. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24. Traffic and your weather forecast coming up next.